I always want to say thank you for the opportunity to share. And I always say this anytime I get this opportunity. I always say that I remind you I'm on the same journey. I'm trying to figure it out, what it means to follow Christ, to live in his footsteps, to love like Jesus did. Hopefully we're all striving for that same thing. If you remember, we just finished up a series in James. How many weeks, Carrie, did that go? Like 8? What do you think, 8? I don't know about you, but I hope you enjoyed the journey that Carrie led us through. James is one of my favorite books in the Bible. If you haven't spent time digging through it, if you don't remember a lot of the stuff, there's so much good, tangible wisdom, I think, and perspective on how we should live our lives. I think the one that constantly sticks in my mind from James is quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Man, that wisdom will never fail you if you try and live by it every single day of your life. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. But as Carrie finished last week, he was talking about confessing and the value that when we confess to each other, and how that is freeing and helps us, I would say, live to greater potential in our relationship with Jesus Christ. I hope you gained a lot from it. And again, I would not fault you this, even as we've moved into the Christmas season. If you want to keep digging in James, I'm actually going to do it myself with a couple guys, just because I think there's so much life lessons that we can learn from the book of James. Before I do that, Carrie usually starts with humor, and I don't have any good jokes, so I wasn't going to do any jokes. But I thought I like doing top 10 lists. It's been a while. It's probably been like almost a year since I've had a chance to share, but I'm going to do a top 10 list of favorite Christmas movies, okay? Now, you're probably already getting some ideas in your head. So if I leave the movie that you have in your head off the list, forgive me. This was kind of my top 10 list of ones that just popped in my brain. And I'm not going to show any clips. I wish I could, but for the time's sake, I'm just going to show kind of the title screen. So the first one I got up here is Jingle All the Way. How many of you guys have seen that movie? My favorite line in that movie is when he says, "Oh, poor baby," but anyways. What's the next one, Carrie? Miracle on 30. That's kind of the OG, the original Miracle on 34th Street. They also redid it, so some of you may be more familiar with that. The next one I thought of was Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase. Oh, I get some claps back there, yeah. That's a great movie. It's hilarious. Elf, yes, with Will Ferrell. And A Christmas Carol. That's a good one, with Scrooge. Ebenezer Scrooge. What's the next one? A Christmas Story. I think that might be Carrie's favorite, right? Christmas Story, maybe? No? Okay. I thought I heard that one time. I guess I was wrong. Let's go to the next one. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Obviously, I think they've done that one like a million times, but the next one I had on there is Home Alone. Claps. Yeah, Home Alone. The next one, It's a Wonderful Life. That's taken it way back a little bit. And this is my personal favorite, the Santa Claus. I don't know if as we get closer, if you're one of those people who like to reminisce and watch one of those Christmas movies. That's the one I usually go to, is the Santa Claus. It's like, did I die there? Oh, Carrie's raising his hand. But I wanted to give a little historical reference or maybe explanation. How many of you are familiar with what that word Advent actually means? Anybody want to raise their hand? Be brave. Okay, that's all right. I checked it out because I wanted to make sure I had my ducks in a row. Advent literally means arrival, coming into being, or simply coming. And I found a great description. I know that some people are going to possibly cringe when I say this, but it's worth tapping into at times. I found a great description in Wikipedia, and I thought this was enlightening. It said, Christians have spoken of 3 comings of Christ: in the flesh in Bethlehem, in our hearts daily, and in the glory at the end of time. The season offers the opportunity to share in the ancient longing for the coming of the Messiah and to be alert for his second coming. I thought that was pretty neat. I don't know if you've ever associated that word, the coming into being, with the idea of Advent. I think we've typically understood it's relevant to Christmas, obviously. But that idea of the coming. And I like those three descriptions that it used, in the flesh in Bethlehem, in our hearts daily, and in the glory at the end of time. Maybe something to digest this week. Something else I kind of thought of, and it kind of came to my mind because we did get the opportunity to share in communion this week, was I came across this photo, and I don't know if I put it up there. I don't think I did. And you might forgive me because this may be old news, but I don't have any social media. I'm not on Facebook right now. So I don't see some of the pictures and quotes that maybe some of you might see on a consistent basis. So maybe I should get back onto Facebook just for those, because there's some pretty funny ones. But someone showed me this, and it just kind of struck a heart chord with me. And it kind of made me think of what we're doing with communion, but I also thought it can play close to what we celebrate with Christmas. But the picture says, Jesus died for you, knowing you may never love him back. That's true love. And I thought about that with Christmas too. God sent his one and only Son, knowing that you may never love him back. That's pretty bold. I don't know if it sits with you the same way it did to me, but I actually saved it to my phone because I was just like, man, just sometimes it could be just a few words. But Jesus died for us knowing that we may never love him back. That's powerful. And I think all of us right now probably could think of people in our lives that we go, man, they need Jesus. They need to know Jesus. Today, we're going to talk about this idea of hope when you least expect it. If you heard Mike and Glenda this morning in the Advent reading, I know we had a little issue with the mic, but it was centered around this idea of hope and good news. That's what our lovely slide here that is provided by, it's the Women of the Church of God, our parent organization that kind of oversees the Church of God, provides material at this time of year. And it's kind of nice. Because Kerry, when he asked me to share, he says, hey, you want to share? I'm like, sure. About what? And obviously I knew we were getting close to Christmas, so I knew it would probably be tied into that. But I won't lie, I don't have necessarily the vision or things like that. So I just feed off usually what Kerry's sharing. If he would have asked me to share with James, I would have been pumped about that because I love the book of James. But he's like, hey, well, you could check out the Church of God website, or you could check out this. And so we both kind of looked at it, and we kind of talked back and forth. And we like this idea, the good news. And this week we're going to talk about hope. I do have to give a shout out. I put this a little bit later, but I'm tapping into a message that was provided by a Reverend named Jim Lyon. And ironically enough, I could be totally wrong. Maybe I referenced the wrong name, but my father actually like, oh yeah, I know that guy. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. So I'm going to tap into some of his material because I think it's valuable, and I always feel like other people say it better than myself. But the theme verse for today is Isaiah 7:14. Again, this is something that Mike and Glenda shared. It says, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. I think as we lit that candle and we celebrate Advent, it represents hope. Hope is the backbone, I would say, of our faith. One of the phrases that is associated with this, and I'm going to tag it again later this morning, but hope believes yes when our circumstances say no. And this morning we're going to take a quick look into the life of Joseph, Mary's earthly husband. Someone who sometimes in this story of the nativity scene gets a little forgotten. I think if you get a picture in your mind, you think of a nativity scene or a Christmas play that maybe you've seen before. And typically people don't immediately point to Joseph. He's there. But typically you think of, obviously, the baby Jesus. You think of Mary. You think of the angels. You think of the wise men. You think of the shepherds. Probably the animals that were there. Some people get a kick out of the animals when you see like a live nativity scene. But I think what's vital about Joseph's story, and is relatable to all of us, is that he played a key role, even though he kind of stayed in the background a little bit. One more quick poll I want to do, and then I got something special. I'm going to invite Jenin up here. But how many of you guys would say you're a glass half full kind of person? Whoa. How many of you would say kind of even? Sometimes full, sometimes half empty. How many people say they're half empty type? Okay, I got a bunch of people who didn't raise their hand. I get it. Raising your hand's a little uncomfortable. Let me try one more time. Half full? You don't have to raise your hand, but okay. There's a little bit more. That's what I like to see. Joseph was a half full kind of guy. And I'm going to have Jenin come up and share a little bit, and he's going to give us a little bit perspective onto who Joseph was.
Let's put our mindset back in the past about this time of Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem. It was the scariest, most difficult, confusing, exciting, most wonderful day of my life. I mean, when you realize that God is allowing you to be a father, I don't know what to compare that to. But then on top of that, when it seems he has deemed you fit to be the stepfather to his son, that is overwhelming. He is a perfectly happy, healthy baby boy that came into this world, I guess, like most every other kid. I get why they call it labor, though. I mean, since I was 12, I have worked with my hands. But Mary worked hard that night. She was amazing. Through the months of people talking about her behind her back, the long week journey to Bethlehem, and when we got there, and she takes an ordinary feeding trough and turns it into a beautiful cradle. And none of it seemed to faze her. She's amazing. You know, through all of it, I never heard her once ask, why? She just did everything God asked her to. And if she didn't understand why things happened, she knew God was in control. She just followed his will. I get it. I get why God chose her. I really do. But what I don't understand is why he chose me.
I think when we kind of try to wrap our brains around Joseph, it puts a different perspective on the story. We're going to take a look at Matthew chapter 1 this morning. And again, I really feel like once we kind of dig into it a little bit, we'll recognize how, for a lot of us, I think we can relate to Joseph. Let's read Matthew chapter 1. We're going to read verses 18 through 21. This is how Jesus the Messiah was born. His mother Mary was engaged to be married to Joseph, but before the marriage took place, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, to whom she was engaged, was a righteous man and did not want to disgrace her publicly, so he decided to break the engagement quietly. As he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Joseph, son of David, the angel said, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child within her was conceived by the Holy Spirit. And she will have a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. I think in order for us, again, to digest the text and we have to immerse ourselves in that culture. Marriage looked pretty different to them in their culture than it does in ours. Many of us have heard about the idea of being betrothed probably before, but it's not something I would say that's commonly practiced, obviously, in the United States. Trust me, I am very thankful that I had the freedom to choose my spouse that I married, Stephanie. I'm welcome. However, living in that context, I can't imagine how difficult it was to get adjusted to really knowing your spouse. And likewise, ending an arrangement like that wasn't common practice. Once it was set up typically by the father, if you will, or fathers, it wasn't something that was easily broken, and typically it went through. And this, I think, is what makes the story of Joseph so powerful. Once Joseph found out that his soon-to-be wife was already pregnant, right? Part of me thinks he had to be filled with fear and possibly anger. I don't know how you would really take that in. Mary comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm pregnant." I won't lie to you. I'll share a little from my story. My beautiful daughter Ava, who is soon to be 2 years old, this in 11 days. When my wife told me that we were having Ava, I probably didn't respond the best way. She told me on Easter Sunday 2 years ago, and we weren't at the time planning on having any more kids, but because of my reluctancy to engage in more medical bills, I didn't attempt to potentially fix that issue. So Stephanie comes home from work. She was working graveyard at the time. And she comes home, and I didn't notice it at first, but when she asked me to sit down for a second, then I started realizing she was a little nervous, and I was like, okay, what's this about? And she says to me, "I'm pregnant." And my response in that moment was, "Oh no!" Now, I will tell you, I did feel very, very terrible because we already had 2 kids, so it wasn't the idea of having another child that was terrifying, but the fact that we weren't attempting to, my response in that moment, I felt bad because I know that was not supportive as a husband and father. So again, I can't imagine how Joseph would have felt. Especially, again, really try and put yourself in that culture. Like everything about the process of being betrothed, of a wife and husband being put together, specifically chosen for each other. They were so strict on any form of premarital activities. Again, that's why I say that idea, trying to understand how they grew that relationship with so many restrictions. It wasn't like the freedom that we have here. You can go date. You can go to the movies. You can hold hands till your palms get sweaty. All of you can probably recycle some memories that you have when you met someone and enjoyed their time together. Everything that was planned perfectly was now ruined. His hopes and dreams of having an ideal marriage and family were shattered. I think we all have similar experiences that we've gone through. Maybe an unexpected baby, like I just shared. Maybe a relationship ended. We didn't get a promotion or the new job we were hoping for. An unexpected health issue. The loss of a loved one. In Joseph's most difficult moment, God stepped in. Matthew tells us that as Joseph was considering ending their relationship, quietly, mind you, which still would have had serious ramifications. Joseph recognized this, and God said, "Not so fast." And I do think it is important for us to recognize in Joseph's story, to give him credit, that Matthew points out basically in one word, but it's a really important detail. Matthew specifically mentions to us that Joseph was a righteous man. I don't know what kind of thoughts that triggers for you, but There's only a handful of people in the Bible that it specifically attributes that characteristic to. Abraham was one of them. I want to say Job was one of them. But there's like literally a handful of people that the Bible deliberately says this person was a righteous person. I would not be the first to raise my hand if someone said, hey, are you righteous? I would probably be ducking a little bit. I don't know about you. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I think the significance of that, though, is we recognize in the verses in Matthew in chapter 1 that Joseph's heart was pursuing God. And that's worth giving Joseph some credit for. Again, in their culture, Joseph would have been completely justified to respond very differently. And I do believe at some point in my post-high school studies, because I did go to a private school, I believe in some of my biblical classes I learned some of the ideas of some of the rules and laws that were lived by. So I may be exaggerating a little bit, but I want to say that Joseph probably would have had the right to have her killed. I mean, stoned, right? Is that what you? Yeah. And again, Joseph wasn't from a large town. In the time frame, maybe you would go, oh, but historians and theologians say that the city of Nazareth, which is where he was from, was probably around maybe 400 people. I mean, we've all played the game telephone before, trying to whisper. And we live in a culture today, man, if you even hint something, whether it's on social media or tell the wrong person, that stuff spreads like, whew. I mean, it doesn't take much for rumors to fly and ideas to go. And yet God knew he had a purpose, and he sent an angel. And what was, again, I think something that we can latch on to with Joseph's story is because he was righteous, a person I would say who pursued God, he had Mary's best interest in hand even when he was contemplating breaking off their engagement. The Bible, the text tells us that he was like, okay, contemplating, how can I do this without bringing shame upon her? Because he already knew what was going to happen. Regardless if he did it quietly, any questions are going to come when someone gets pregnant. It's just the way life works. And I think it's worth giving Joseph that credit for having that, I would say, glass half full mentality. The Apostle Paul, I'm going to finish with this. The Apostle Paul famously wrote to the believers in Rome, "For in this hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes in what he sees? But if we hope in what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what the mind of the Spirit, what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God." And here's the part I want you to let sink in. "And we know that those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." I found it really, kind of a God moment this week as I was kind of trying to put things together. And again, like I said, I was utilizing a message by Reverend Jim Lyons, and he's the one who inserted Romans 8:28. And it's come up in some conversations recently I've had with Carrie and some other people. And there's something important, I think, for us to know. And it's when in verse 28 when it says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good." Sometimes we can get confused, I think, in the idea that, well, if we love God, he's going to make everything work together for my good, to benefit my circumstances, to make things work out the way I think they should work. And that's not what the text says. There are times I think all of us will acknowledge, all of us will identify with where things don't go the way we hoped, the way we wish they would have. But I think one of the identifying characteristics of people who pursue Christ, who love God, is the hope that we live with every single day. This Advent season, we have the opportunity to live in a way that speaks volumes to the people around us. The good news is that God sent his one and only Son, born in the most humble circumstances, to transform this world and bring new life and new hope. I told you I was going to cycle back to this, and I want this to sit in with you this week. Hope believes yes when our circumstances say no. Maybe for some of us, I think, I'm not foolish. I recognize for some people, maybe you're a little more pessimistic. Maybe you don't always look at things with a glass half full. But when we embrace this idea that the creator of the heavens and the earth was willing to send his Son, was willing to come down to earth as a child to save us from ourselves, to save us from the sin that separated us from him, knowing that we may not love him back. That's powerful. I know that the people I come in contact with, for some reason around my job at Walgreens, people keep saying I'm bubbly. I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as bubbly. But I do whistle. I do sing at work. Last weekend, since Carrie was able to take the lead with the singing, Carrie and Annie helped out with that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday was when my voice was probably at its worst. One of my coworkers said to me, "Wow, this is going to be one of the quietest nights of work we've had in months." And I asked her, I was like, "Oh, her name's PJ," and I said, "PJ, what's that supposed to mean?" And she says, "Well, you're always singing." And she knows why. But I do hope that in some way, if I can live with that mentality, with that idea that hope believes yes, even when everything around us says no, that alone can speak into someone's life. Let's pray.